The Alpha King avoided me for 4 years. He did it the way other men breathe, without thought, without effort, as natural to him as the Iron Crown he never seemed to feel the weight of. Through 12 seasonal balls, I stood against the cold stone of Hollowmere's great hall in the one good dress I owned, and 12 times the Grey King's gaze swept the room like a tide and parted around me as though I were a rock the water had long ago learned to avoid. He looked at everyone. Stewards, scullions, foreign envoys, the drunk and the dangerous. He looked at all of them. He never once let his eyes land on me. So this autumn, for the first time in my life, I did not go. I told myself it was nothing, a tired woman choosing a quiet room over 3 hours of being unseen. I did not know that the moment the music started in that distant hall without me, the King of Caldrith would grip the edge of a banquet table until the oak split beneath his hands. I did not know that every hound in the city would lift its head at once and begin to howl. And I most certainly did not know that by morning a man who had spent 4 years refusing to see me would be tearing his own court apart to find the one chair that had stayed empty. Before we dive into Cerys and Freddie's story, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. I want to know, are you team he was protecting her the whole time, or team for years is 4 years, Your Majesty, you grovel harder? Because this story is about to get intense. And if you're already hooked, hit subscribe. I'm dropping another werewolf romance tomorrow, and you do not want to miss it. Now let's get back to Cerys' story. Here we go. Chapter 1. The Empty Chair. My hands always smelled of 2 things, the iron tang of oak gall ink and the soft, animal sweetness of beeswax. I worked them into vellum and thread in the lower archive of Hollowmere Keep, where the light came thin and gray through windows set too high to see the sky, and where the only company I kept was 3,000 books and the slow patient rot of centuries. I bound them. I copied them. I painted the small bright animals into the margins where the great scholars had left room for nothing but emptiness. It was the kind of work no one notices until it is gone, which suited me, because I was the kind of person no one notices at all. I was 23 years old, and I had been left at the keep's eastern gate as an infant, wrapped in wool, with no name and no note, and nothing but a thin copper bracelet too small to slip over a grown woman's hand, so I wore it crammed above my elbow where it left a permanent green ring on my skin. The archivists raised me the way you raise a stray that wanders in out of the rain, fed, sheltered, never quite belonging to anyone in the particular way that means you matter. I learned early to take up little space. I learned that useful was the nearest thing to wanted I was ever likely to hold. And 4 times a year, like every wolf of age in Caldrith, I was expected to attend the seasonal balls. You're not going, Nessa said from the doorway, which was not a question, because she'd known me 11 years and could read the slump of my shoulders like a colophon. She was a scribe 2 desks down, all freckles and certainty, holding a heel of bread she'd already started in on. I'm not going, I agreed, drawing a fox's tail along the edge of a salter without looking up. You say that every season. And every season I put on the dress and stand against the wall like one more candle in one more sconce, and I watch the king not look at me, and I come home feeling like something the night used and discarded. My brush stilled. Not this time. The lighting is better here, and no one wears perfume that makes me sneeze. Nessa's face did the thing it did when she was deciding whether to fight me. It's about him. It was always about him. Freddie Pearson, the Grey King, Alpha of Caldrith, the wolf the whole realm bent around without being asked. Black hair he never bothered to tame, swept back off a face built from hard angles, dark stubble shading a jaw you could have struck flint against, and eyes the color of a winter sky an hour before snow. There was a thin, pale scar through the arch of his left brow that I had spent 4 years memorizing from across rooms I was not allowed into. When he entered a hall, the air changed pressure. Conversation tilted toward him like grass before wind. I had felt the pull from the very first ball, a thread hooked behind my breastbone, tugging whenever his voice carried, tightening whenever his gaze swept near. I'd called it admiration, then I'd called it foolishness, and then I'd simply stopped naming it and let it ache. Because the king did not see me. Worse than not seeing. Once, at my second ball, his eyes had found mine across the whole crowded hall and held, and for one impossible heartbeat the world had gone bright and silent and right. Then the color had drained from his face, as though I were something terrible, and he had wrenched his gaze away so violently that the goblet snapped in his hand, and in 2 years and 10 balls since, he had never let it land on me again. You can survive a great deal of being invisible. It is being looked away from that breaks you. It's not about him, I lied. I'm tired, Nessa. Let me be tired in peace. She left me to it. That night, I stayed in my narrow room above the bindery. I made tea I didn't drink. I read 4 pages about the medicinal properties of bog myrtle and remembered none of them. And somewhere across the dark grounds, in a hall full of 700 wolves in their finery, the music began without me. I felt it the instant it did. The thread behind my breastbone did not tug. It yanked, hard enough that I gasped and pressed the heel of my hand to my sternum. The room tilted. For one suspended moment I was certain, with the bone-deep certainty of a thing you have no words for, that somewhere far away something I belonged to had begun to come apart. Outside, a hound started up, then another, then every dog in the lower city, all at once, a single rising howl that climbed the keep walls and did not stop for an hour. I sat on the edge of my bed with my arms wrapped around myself and told myself it was a storm coming. Wolves howl at storms. I slept badly. By dawn the keep was already humming with it. The king had collapsed at the autumn ball, they said. The gray king, who had never in living memory so much as swayed, had gone gray as ash in the middle of his own hall, gripped the table until the wood cracked, and ordered the doors sealed, and every guest counted by name. Counted by name. As though he were hunting for someone. As though, out of 700 faces, he had finally noticed the one that wasn't there. I was scraping wax from under my nails when the summons came. Cream paper. Black wax, stamped with the running wolf crest. My name written in a hand that did not waste a single curve. Miss Cerys Duncan. Your presence is required at the keep this hour. By order of His Majesty, King Freddie Pearson. My hands did not shake, which surprised me, because the rest of me was shaking enough for all of us. Chapter 2, The Summons. A guard walked me up through corridors I had only ever cleaned, never crossed. The deeper we climbed, the colder the air grew, and the older the stone, until we stopped before a door carved with wolves frozen mid-stride, and a lean man stepped out to meet me, who looked as though he had not been surprised by anything in a decade. Miss Duncan. He had a soldier's stillness and a clerk's eyes. I am Doran, the king's beta. You'll forgive the abruptness. I don't think I have a choice, I said. No, he agreed, almost kindly. You don't. Inside, a healer was waiting, a broad, gray-haired woman named Maeve who looked me over the way I looked over a damaged spine, assessing where the breaks were. Sit, she said, and I sat, and she asked me 3 questions about my health and a 4th about whether I had ever felt pulled anywhere I could not explain, and at that one my mouth went dry and I said no, and she wrote something down and did not believe me. He's been unwell, Doran said, watching my face. Worse since the autumn ball. But it began long before, episodes, the healers called them. Stretches where he doesn't sleep, where his wolf surfaces in council, where he behaves as though something has been cut out of him, and the wound has only just begun to ache. He paused. Last night was the worst we have seen. And the one variable that changed last night, Miss Duncan, was you. I make books, I said. I have never spoken a word to the king in my life. I'm aware. Doran's mouth did something that was not a smile. That is rather the point. They took me to him. I had only ever seen Freddie Pearson gilded by candlelight from 100 feet away, untouchable, carved. Up close the carving had cracked. He sat in a chair by a cold window with the gray morning falling across him, and he was ruined, skin gone ashen, the hollows beneath his eyes deep as bruises, his cheekbones pushing too sharp against the skin, his hands flat on the chair arms to hide a tremor he could not hide. He looked like a man who had not slept in weeks, because he had not. And then he looked at me. His eyes found mine and landed. For the first time in 4 years they landed and did not slide away, and it hit me like walking into a closed door in the dark, the breath gone out of me, the room contracting to the single gray point of his gaze. Something in my chest unlocked, with an almost audible click. For one heartbeat his whole face opened like a door thrown wide, raw and stunned and starving. Then it slammed shut. "Leave us," he said to the others, and his voice was gravel dragged over stone. When the door closed, he did not look at me again. He looked at the wall, at the floor, anywhere but at me, and when he spoke it was cold enough to frost the glass. "You will not come here again after today. Whatever Maeve thinks she's found, she's wrong, and I will not have my keep turned into a menagerie for a candlemaker's daughter to gawk at." The cruelty was so sudden and so deliberate that for a moment I couldn't speak. Then 4 years of standing against a wall while this man looked at everyone but me rose up my throat like bile. "I make books," I said. "And I didn't ask to be dragged up here so a king could insult me before breakfast. You summoned me, Your Majesty. I'd have happily never seen your face again." His head turned, the gray eyes found me, and he flinched, a full-body recoil, as though my voice had struck him somewhere old and tender, and the cruelty cracked clean across the middle, and underneath it I saw something I had not expected at all. He looked afraid. "Get out," he said, very quietly. "Gladly." But Maeve was at the door, and she had heard, and she planted herself in the frame like a wall. His pulse, she said to no one and everyone, dropped 20 beats the moment she crossed that threshold. I have watched it climb for 3 weeks and nothing, not poppy, not silver, not prayer, has slowed it. She slowed it by walking in. She turned her flat stare on the king. "You can throw her out, Freddie. You'll be on the floor by nightfall, and we both know it. Or you can let her sit in a chair for 1 hour and let me learn what the realm cannot afford to lose you over." The silence went on long enough to grow its own weather. "1 hour," he said at last, to the window. "And then she goes home and forgets this keep exists." 1 hour, I said, with all the dignity of a woman who had just been called a menagerie. "I'll need a chair by the light. I have work to finish, and I'm not wasting good daylight watching a king sulk." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, there and gone. Too fast to be sure. But I was sure. And it frightened me more than the cruelty had, because a man does not fight that hard to look away from a woman who means nothing to him. Chapter 3. Proximity. They gave me a chair by the tall window in his study, 6 feet from his desk, and for the first hour I sat in it like a summons made flesh, and we said nothing at all. I had brought my work, a water-damaged herbal whose signatures had pulled loose, and I laid my tools across my knees and threaded a needle and began to resew the spine, because my hands have always known what to do when the rest of me does not. He worked, or pretended to. I felt his attention on me the way you feel sun through a window, a warmth with weight to it, and every time I glanced up his eyes were already snapping back to his papers. "You'll ruin your sight, scowling at the same line that long," I said on the second day. "I am the king. I'll ruin what I please."
Emma.
The lines still won't have changed. By the 4th day the silences had begun to fray at the edges. He asked, abruptly, what the smell was, that sweetness under the ink, and I told him beeswax, that I used it to dress the threads so it ran clean through the holes, and he was quiet for a while and then said, "It's not unpleasant," in the tone of a man making a great concession, and I had to bite my cheek not to laugh. It was on the 5th day that I understood I had read him wrong from the start. I had thought him contemptuous. He wasn't. He was braced, the way you brace a door against a storm, the way you hold a wound closed with your whole hand. Being near me did not bore him. It cost him. I would catch him with his jaw set and his knuckles white and his breath gone shallow, fighting something I couldn't see, and the moment I shifted my chair an inch closer, he would go rigid as a man stepping onto thin ice. He was not keeping his distance because I was nothing to him. He was keeping it like a man keeping his hands off a fire he wanted very badly to put them into. "Tell me about that," he said one afternoon, without preamble, and nodded at my arm, at the copper bracelet pushed above my elbow, catching the light. "It's nothing. It's all I came with." I touched it without meaning to. I was left at the eastern gate. No name, no note, just this, too small to wear properly. So I wear it where it fits. I shrugged. The old practiced shrug of a woman making her own abandonment sounds small. I've never belonged to anyone in particular. You learn to take up less room. It's not a tragedy. It's just a fact. The pen had stopped moving. When I looked up, he was staring at me, and his face had gone very still and very strange, and his voice when it came was almost too low to hear. "It is a tragedy," he said. "That you were made to believe that is a tragedy I will not forgive." I didn't know what to say to that. So I reached across to set the herbal on his desk, to show him the rejoined signatures, some foolish impulse to share the one thing I was good at, and the back of my hand brushed the back of his. The world detonated. There is no smaller word for it. Warmth and recognition and a grief so old it felt like memory came pouring up my arm and into my chest, and underneath it, beneath the rightness, something dark and wound-tight, like touching a living thing bound in chains I couldn't see. Freddie made a sound that was not a word. His chair scraped back, his hand tore from mine, and he was on his feet with his back to the window and his breath coming in pieces. "Out," he said. "Maeve, now, get her out. Freddie, get her out." I went, with the warmth still roaring in my chest and his terror still ringing in the room. But at the door I looked back, and he had pressed both hands flat to the cold glass and bowed his head between them, and he was shaking like a man who had just held his hand in the fire after all, and pulled it out only because he loved the thing it would burn. Chapter 4. The Prophecy. He sent word the next morning that the trials were ended. Maeve sent word back, in front of me, that if he dismissed me he would be dead inside the month, and the realm could choose his successor over his corpse, and that he might at least do me the courtesy of telling me why before he killed us both. That last part, us both, I didn't understand. Not yet. He had me brought to a small room with no windows, only a fire, as though he could not bear to do this in the light. He stood with his back to me for a long time. When he spoke, the king was gone out of his voice. What was left was only tired. "For years ago I was crowned in the old hall," he said. "It is custom for the seer to attend the anointing, to read the years for the new alpha, the way they have for every king of Caldrith back to the first stones. Her name is Halla. She is old and half-blind, and she has never once been wrong." He drew a breath. She put her hands on my head and she went rigid, and what she said in front of the whole court was this: "The day the Grey King takes his fated mate, Caldrith burns. War from the south. Plague behind it. The realm in ash and the woman at the center of it dead in the first season." The fire cracked. I had gone very cold. "That night," he said, "I came to my first ball as king. And I looked across the hall, and I found a face I had never seen before, and my wolf came up so hard and so certain that I nearly went to my knees in front of 700 people." He turned, finally, and looked at me with 4 years of grief in his gray eyes. "I had heard the prophecy not an hour before, Cerys. And then I looked up and there you were. Mine. The one thing in all the world I was forbidden to want, standing against the wall in a dress you'd clearly mended yourself, looking at me like I was something worth watching." I could not breathe. "You knew." "I have known since the first night." His jaw worked. "I learned your name within the week. I learned your craft, your friend, the window you read by. I had Doran make certain you were never moved anywhere I might cross you by accident, never promoted to any post that would put you in my path, not to keep you down, gods, never that, but to keep you alive. Because every day my wolf has howled to claim you, and every day I have refused, because the moment I let my eyes land on you, and keep them there, I believed I was lighting the match that burned the realm and killed you in the bargain. So you looked away," I said. My voice came out raw. "For years. You let me think I was nothing. You let me build a whole life out of believing I was the kind of woman a man looks straight through, when the truth was you were." The words stuck. "You were holding a fire shut with your bare hands the entire time. And you never thought to tell me. You never once let me choose. There was no choice to give you." He came closer, helpless with it. "What would I have said? You are mine, and to have you is to doom us both? I would have ruined your life with the knowing of it." "You ruined it anyway," I said. "You just made sure I did it alone." That landed. I watched it land. And to his credit, he did not flinch from it. He stood there and let it strike and bleed. "Now you understand," he said quietly, "why you cannot come here again. The bond is the danger. Every hour you sit in that chair it grows stronger, and the stronger it grows the closer I come to doing the one thing that ends everything. You felt it yesterday. the dark beneath the warmth. That is the leash, Cerys, and it is fraying. I will not be the king who burned the world for a candlemaker's daughter. His voice cracked on the last of it. Even if she is the only thing in that world I have ever wanted. Then send me away, I said. Coward. He closed his eyes. Yes. And let us both rot apart instead of together, because a half-blind woman put her hands on your head 4 years ago, and you never once thought to check whether she was right. He opened his eyes. Something moved behind them, too late but moving. Check, he repeated. But the door was already open, and Doran was already there to take me home, and the king let me go for the second time, and I walked out into the gray with the warmth of him still in my chest and the cold certainty that I was not going to survive being sent away again. Chapter 5. The Unraveling. The first night, I told myself I was relieved. I had my room, my work, my quiet. I had answers, even if they were the wrong ones. I lit my candle and bound my books and went to bed. The second night the pull started. Not the old gentle thread, but a hook driven deep behind my ribs, a line drawn taut across the whole dark distance of the keep to wherever he was, and every breath I took dragged against it. The wax wouldn't pour clean. My hands shook over the spine of a book I'd bound 100 times. By the third night, I had a fever no water could break, and something inside me I had never known was there woke up and began to howl. My wolf. 23 years dormant, and now she paced the inside of my chest and clawed at my breastbone, and threw herself toward the window, toward him, until I lay on the floor with my arms wrapped around my own ribs and wept into the cold stone. By the fourth morning my reflection had gone gray at the edges, the color leaching out of me like dye out of cloth left in the rain. I was a candle, I thought, with a clarity that frightened me. I was a candle burning down to nothing, and the wick was running out fast. Word reached me anyway, the way word does. The king was no better. The king was worse. He had shattered the council table with his bare hands during a trade dispute. His wolf had surfaced twice in open session. And into that ruin had stepped Lord Chancellor Crane, the man who had raised Freddie after the old king died, the silver-haired statesman who stood always at the throne's right shoulder. And Crane was, with grave reluctance and a great show of duty, taking the realm in hand. A marriage was being arranged, people whispered, to the daughter of House Vass, a steadying alliance, a sensible queen, an heir, while his majesty recovered. Caldrith needed stability. Lord Crane only wanted what was best. I lay in my fever and listened to my city decide my king's fate, and somewhere under the sickness a colder, clearer voice spoke up. Convenient, it said. How convenient that a prophecy keeps him unmated, and an unmated king is a king who needs a regent, and a regent who raised him is a regent the boy will never suspect. And then there was the man in the lane. I first saw him on the 5th night, a figure at the dark end of the workshop row, past the reach of the lantern, perfectly still, watching my window with the patience of someone who had stood there a long while and meant to stand there longer. He did not move when I moved. He was gone by morning. He came back the 6th night, closer, and I sat against the wall with a binding knife in my fist until the sky grayed. By the 7th morning I should have stayed in bed. I should have let the fever have me. Instead I dragged myself up, because the cold, clear voice would not be quiet, and the cold, clear voice was an archivist's voice, and it had a question. A prophecy spoken at a coronation is not only spoken, it is recorded. Hala's words would have been taken down by the court scribe on the day, witnessed and sealed and bound into the keep's register with every other royal right going back to the first stones. I knew exactly where that register would be because I had rebound its cousins with my own hands. It would be in the deep archive, 3 floors beneath the world, in the dark where they keep the things too important to read. And I was, whatever else I was, the woman who knew that room better than any soul alive. I wrapped myself in every shawl I owned, took up my candle and my knife, and went down to find out for myself whether a half-blind old woman had really sentenced us to burn, or whether someone had only wanted us to think she had. Chapter 6. The Forged Line. The deep archive smells of cold stone and slow decay, and it does not forgive the careless. I went down the worn spiral by candlelight, past the iron grates, into the long, low vault where the realm keeps its memory. The coronation register was where I knew it would be, a great black-bound thing chained to its shelf, its boards swollen with age. My hands were steady on it. Down here, where the work was, they were always steady. I found the year. I found the rite. I found, in a clerk's careful hand, the anointing of King Freddie Pearson, and there, at the foot of the page, the seer's words set down as law. The day the Grey King takes his fated mate, Caldrith burns. I almost stopped there. It would have been so easy to stop there, to let the words be true and crawl back up and die quietly of them. But I am a binder. And a binder does not read a page. A binder reads the binding. The page was wrong. I saw it the way you see a forgery, only if you have spent your life among the real thing. The signature that held this leaf had been cut from the book and a new one sewn in. The thread was a half shade too bright, the stitch a fraction too even, the kettle stitch tied in a knot the old keep scribes never used but that I had seen lately on a court document or two. And the leaf itself, when I held my candle low and let the flame rake across the surface, the vellum showed the ghost of older writing beneath the ink, scraped down and written over. A palimpsest. Someone had taken a knife to the seer's true words and written new ones on the bone of them. My heart was slamming. I wet my fingertip, lifted a corner of the relined gutter, and tilted the page to the flame until the scraped letters swam up gray beneath the black. The real prophecy was longer. The real prophecy said this: the day the Grey King takes his fated mate, the burning is turned away. But a throne kept empty for fear of love invites the fire it flees, and the realm divided against its own heart will fall to the hand that profits by the dividing. Turned away, not burns. The bond did not doom Caldrith. The bond saved it. And the danger, the fire, the fall, came from exactly the thing that had been done to us. A throne held empty on purpose, a king kept from his heart on purpose, by a hand that profited. I knew that kettle stitch. I had seen it that very season, on a sealed writ from the Chancellor's own office. "You always were the one to watch," said a voice from the dark behind me. "Crane said you'd come down here eventually." He said a clever little binder couldn't help herself. I turned. The man from the lane stood at the foot of the stair with a blade in his hand and no patience left in his face, and behind him the only door out of the vault. I did the only thing I could. I tore the page free, clutched it to my chest, and as he lunged I threw my candle at his eyes and ran for the dark of the stacks I knew and he did not, and somewhere far above me, across the whole sleeping weight of the keep, I felt the bond go white, felt Freddie surge awake out of his fever and feel my terror as if it were his own, and I screamed his name down a corridor of dead king's bones and prayed the prophecy had been right about something. Chapter 7. Let Your Eyes Land. I do not remember most of the running. I remember the dark, and the cold, and the breath sawing in my chest, and the man's footsteps gaining because a binder is no match for a trained blade. I remember reaching the foot of the spiral stair with the forged page crushed to my ribs and feeling my fevered body finally simply quit, my knees folding, the stone rushing up, the candle of me guttering out at last. And then the world above me cracked open like a struck bell. I felt him before I saw him. The bond went from white to blinding, and a sound came down the stair that was not human and not quite wolf, a roar with a king's grief inside it. And then Freddie was there, between me and the blade, and I had never in 4 years of watching him seen anything like it. He had run from his sickbed half across the keep in his nightclothes, gray and gaunt and barely standing, and none of it mattered, because his eyes had finally landed on me, and this time nothing in heaven or earth was going to make them move. "Do not," he said to the man with the knife, very softly, "touch her." The man ran. He did not get far. Doran's people had the stair. But Freddie did not so much as look at him. He dropped his knees on the cold stone and gathered me up against his chest, and his hands shook against my face, and the careful king I had watched from across 100 rooms was simply gone. What knelt over me in the dark was a man with every wall thrown down, openly, in front of his own guards, terrified. "I felt you," he said. "I felt you breaking and I couldn't, Cerys."
Cerys, stay.
"Look at me. Let your eyes land, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere this time. I swear it on the crown. Only stay. Read it. I managed. I pushed the crumpled page against his chest. Freddie.
Read it.
The seal, the stitch, it's Crane's hand. He forged it. The prophecy. He scraped the truth off the bone and wrote us a lie. He went still. I watched him read it by Doran's lifted lantern, watched him read the scraped gray letters swimming beneath the false black ones, watched the words go into him like a blade going in slow. The day the Gray King takes his fated mate, the burning is turned away. I watched 4 years of discipline, for years of holding his hand in the fire, for years of looking away from the one face he wanted, land all at once on the truth that none of it had ever needed to happen. He raised me, Freddie said. His voice had gone strange and quiet. After my father died, Crane raised me. He stood at my anointing. He told me the seer had sentenced us. He held my hand while I learned I could never have you, and his grip tightened on the page until his knuckles whitened. He has been arranging my wedding. To a girl whose house he controls, I said. To get an heir he can steer, through a king he kept too lonely to fight him. The thing that came over Freddie's face then was worse than rage. It was rage and grief braided, so tight you couldn't tell which was load-bearing. He bent his forehead to mine, and I felt the bond pour between us. No longer fraying, no longer dark, just the warmth now, just the rightness. The leash burned away to nothing. I have wronged you in every way a man can wrong a woman, he said against my skin. I will spend my life making it right. But first I am going to walk into my own hall, and I am going to put this page on the table in front of the man who wrote it, and I am going to choose you out loud in front of every soul in Caldrith. He drew back enough to look at me, and his eyes held mine and stayed. And I would like, if you'll have a fool who took 4 years too long, for you to choose me back. Don't drop me on the way up the stairs, I said, and we'll discuss it. The exhausted ghost of his real smile broke across his face at last. He gathered me up and he carried me toward the light, and not once in all that long climb, did he let his eyes leave mine. Chapter 8. The Choosing. He did not let me hide in a sick room for it. I told him I wanted to be there on my own feet, and he understood that better than anyone alive could have, and so when the great hall filled, the full court summoned at dawn, sleepy and bewildered and afraid, I stood at the king's right hand where the chancellor was used to standing, in a borrowed gown, with my copper bracelet pushed above my elbow and my chin up and the forged page in Freddie's hand. Crane came in last, composed, silver-haired, every inch the grave statesman, and I watched his step falter by exactly 1 beat when he saw me standing in his place. Then the mask resettled. Your Majesty looks recovered, he said smoothly. The realm rejoices. Do you know what this is? Freddie laid the page on the long table between them. It's the coronation register. The leaf you cut out and re-sewed. The words you scraped off the bone and wrote your lie across. His voice did not rise. That was the terrible part. The burning is turned away. That is what Hallis said over me. You changed saved to Burns Aldrich. You sentenced me to 4 years in my own skin for a prophecy you wrote yourself. The hall had gone utterly silent. Crane looked at the page a long moment, and then, because he was clever and the cleverest thing he could do was not deny it, he simply sighed, the way a tired tutor sighs at a slow pupil. Yes, he said. I did. And I would do it again. A growl moved through the hall, like wind through wheat. A mated alpha is a ruined king, Crane went on unhurried, addressing the whole court now, reasonable as a man explaining the weather. Every history we own proves it. A king bonded to a mate is a king who will burn an army to spare one woman, who chooses his heart over his realm, who cannot be advised because he cannot be moved. I held this throne steady for 30 years under your father, and I would not watch a boy I raised throw the realm away on a foundling the moment his wolf whined for her. His gaze flicked to me, cold and dismissive, and there it was, the look I had spent my whole life being given. I kept her where she belonged, unseen, unranked, out of your path. She was a loose thread. I simply declined to let her unravel anything that mattered. And there, at unravel, at belonged, at foundling, something in me that had been bent low my whole life quietly stood up. You made me small, I said, and my voice carried, steady, into every corner of that hall. You decided what I was worth before I could even speak, and then you spent 4 years making sure I never found out you were wrong. You called me a loose thread. I stepped forward. Lord Crane, I am a binder. I know exactly what a thread is worth. It's the only thing holding the whole book together. And you forgot that the woman you decided was too small to matter was the one person in this realm who could read your stitching. I watched it land. For the first time, I watched him be the one it landed on. Maeve, Freddie said. Send for Hala. Let the realm hear from the seer's own mouth which words are hers. Then he turned from Crane as though the Chancellor had already ceased to exist, and he came and took my face in both his hands, there in front of the entire court, and his eyes held mine and did not flicker. I choose Cerys Duncan, he said, loud and clear and unafraid. Not because she heals me. Not because the prophecy permits it, because she is the bravest, sharpest, most stubbornly whole person I have ever known, and I was a coward and a fool for 4 years, and I would burn every false word ever written about us to stand here and say it. She is mine, and I am hers, and the realm can witness it. He bent his head to mine. Will you have me? Let your eyes land, I whispered, and don't ever look away again. Never again, he said against my mouth and kissed me. It was 4 years of looking away undone in a single point of contact. His hands shook in my hair and mine fisted in his shirt, and the bond between us blazed so bright I felt it behind my eyes. And when he pressed his mouth to the curve of my throat in question, I tipped my head and said yes, and the mating bite was fire and lightning, and the sound of a lock finally turning. I bit him back and marked him as mine. And the bond snapped home golden and complete, and his free wolf and my newborn one threw back their heads together, and somewhere in the howl was no war and no doom at all, only a relief so deep it shook the iron in the chandeliers. They took Crane while the court still wept. He went without a struggle, composed to the last. And I stood in the place that had always been his, in the arms of the king who had finally seen me, and felt nothing for the man at all, nothing but the clean, quiet satisfaction of a woman who had stopped, forever, apologizing for taking up room. Chapter 9. The Grey Queen. 4 years later, the Winter Ball is the largest Caldrith has seen in a generation, and I am late to it because I was in the bindery. I am the queen now, bonded, crowned, named in every register in my own hand, which I rebound personally to be certain. But I never gave up the lower archive. The light is still thin and gray, and the books still pull loose at the spine, and I still go down most mornings with wax under my nails and ink on my fingers, because that work was never the cage Crane meant it to be. It was the one thing in my old small life that was mine, freely chosen, and a thing you choose is not a cage. Freddie understood that before I had the words for it. He had a window cut into the deep archive, so I would never again have to work without seeing the sky. Caldrith did not burn. That is the simplest way to say what the false prophecy got most wrong. The realm we built on the truth of the real one, the burning is turned away, has been 4 years of harvests that came in heavy and borders that stayed quiet, and a treasury that, for the first time in living memory, does not flinch when you open the books. The seer Hala, vindicated and delighted, comes to court twice a year now and tells anyone who will listen that she always said saved, the old woman did, and that no one ever listens to the blind. Crane spends his days in a stone room with a single window and a great deal of time to consider how a loose thread brought down the whole of his weaving. And Freddie sleeps. That is the part one did not know to hope for. The man who had not closed his eyes in peace since his coronation now sleeps like the dead with his arm thrown across me, and on the rare nights he wakes reaching into the dark for an emptiness that used to be there, my hand finds his before he's fully awake, and he settles, every time, because I am always there. I will always be there. Tonight he stands at the head of the hall with one hand resting at the small of my back, his thumb tracing slow idle patterns against the silk while he argues grain tariffs with an envoy from the south, conducting affairs of state while maintaining constant physical contact with his mate, which I find both faintly ridiculous and entirely the point. Dorand is here, gray at the temples now, pretending not to be moved. Maeve is here, drinking the good wine and earning it. Nessa is here in a dress finer than anything she's ever owned, and she has not once let me forget that she told me to go to the ball. I look out over the hall, the candlelight, the dancers, the hundreds of wolves in their finery, and I remember standing pressed to that far wall in my one good dress, watching a life I believed I could never touch, aching for a king who would not let his eyes land. "You're staring at the crowd," Freddie murmurs against my ear. I'm remembering. Remembering what? I turn and look up at the face I watched from across this room for 4 years, at the gray eyes that find mine now and stay. Always stay. Standing against the wall, I say. Something in him softens. He lifts my hand, the one with the copper bracelet pushed above the elbow, the only thing I came into this world with, and he presses his mouth to my knuckles in full view of the entire court, the way he should have the very first night, for years and a lifetime ago. "Never again," he says. The music swells, and the candles burn, and the woman they all once looked through dances with her king in the center of the hall, exactly where she was always meant to be. Because the truth was never that she was too small to be seen. The truth was that being unseen is a wound someone chose to give her, and being chosen, out loud and unafraid, is how the wound finally closes. Love was never the thing that would burn the world down. Love, it turned out, was the only thing that ever turned the burning away. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of Cerys and Freddie's story. It means everything to me. If this one healed something in you, drop a comment and tell me your favorite moment, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's tale.